10 worst hurricanes of all time. Over 25 hurricanes occur in an average year in the Atlantic and East Pacific basins, with over 2,000 storms reported in recorded history. Some of these hurricanes have been surprisingly memorable for their impacts or intensity, which we will look at today for being the top 10 worst hurricanes of all time, focusing this time on the extraordinary peak intensities and strengths held by each hurricane on this list. Hurricane Sandy. After whirling through Jamaica, Cuba, and Haiti, the immense, slow-moving Hurricane Sandy diminished to a post-tropical cyclone before making landfall in the U.S. in October 2012. But it was powerful enough to cause destruction on New York City and the Jersey Shore. A tremendous storm surge of more than 13 feet left parts of Lower Manhattan underwater, and parts of Staten Island and beaches in Queens were nearly wiped off the map. It destroyed and damaged about 650,000 homes in the Northeast U.S. and killed 117 people in the U.S. alone, as well as 69 others in Canada and the Caribbean. The estimated damage impact was $65 billion. Hurricane Ivan. On September 16, 2004, Hurricane Ivan hit Gulf Shores, Alabama. It's one of the country's most devastating hurricanes. The storm destroyed the coastlines of Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle, and produced waves more than 50 feet high. What made this Category 3 hurricane so catastrophic? It had a very long life for a hurricane, and it intensified and weakened many times throughout that cycle, which led to it being Category 5. Despite quickly weakening, it resumed to spawn tons of rain and even generated tornadoes across the southeastern U.S. Ivan was blamed for the death of 57 people in the United States and another 67 in the West Indies. Damage was approximately more than $27 billion in 2017 dollars. Hurricane Camille. When Hurricane Camille hit in August 1969, it was a brutal storm that brought heavy inundation and 200 miles per hour winds to the Gulf Coast and subsequently Virginia. It also is one of only 2 Category 5 hurricanes to hit the continental U.S. since 1900. After forming near the Cayman Islands in August 1969, Camille first barreled through Cuba as a Category 3, but strengthened in the Gulf of Mexico. A 24-foot storm surge also played a part in major devastation of Mississippi. The storm led to 256 deaths and more than $1.4 billion in damage. Hurricane Gilbert. With a 500 nautical mile diameter, Gilbert was one of the most intense hurricanes ever witnessed in the Atlantic Basin. The storm arose near the Cape Verde Islands on the west coast of Africa. After turning into a Category 5 storm in September 1988, Gilbert engulfed the entire island of Jamaica, damaging approximately 80% of the island's homes. The storm that ensued led to 318 deaths, including 200 people killed in flooding in Mexico and 28 who died when a Cuban freight ship was thrown into a shrimp boat. Gilbert-related damage peaked at about $5.5 billion. 1935 Florida Keys Labor Day Hurricane. This Category 5 storm, regarded as the strongest to hit the U.S. in the 20th century, brought 200-mile-per-hour winds and drenching rain to the upper and middle Florida Keys and killed around 400 people. More than half of the dead were World War I veterans who had been working on building a highway from Key West to Key Largo. Damage in the United States was reckoned at $6 million. This storm is known as the Labor Day Hurricane because the practice of naming hurricanes didn't begin until 1953. Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina is often described as a man-made rather than natural disaster. It originated from a tropical depression, a low-pressure area with a loosely connected group of thunderstorms. On August 26, 2005, the hurricane looked like it was dwindling, but it started strengthening to Category 5 levels quickly over warm water in the Gulf of Mexico. By August 28th, a compulsory evacuation order was issued for New Orleans. As the Category 3 hurricane approached the city, water overtopped its systems of levees, leading them to break and the streets to flood. 40% of hurricane-related deaths were from drowning. Overall, Hurricane Katrina took 1,833 lives and did a damage of $161 billion, hence considered the costliest hurricane in U.S. history. Hurricane Maria. It was the second Category 5 hurricane of the 2017 season. It came just 2 weeks after a brutal Irma. Maria was incredibly devastating as it passed through some of the same areas Irma traveled. The death toll was calculated by the government to be 2,975 people in total. Additionally, the damage costs were reckoned to be at least $1.31 billion for Dominica and over $90 billion for Puerto Rico. Maria was the deadliest storm to hit Puerto Rico and the third catastrophic storm to hit the U.S. after Katrina and Harvey. At one point, 90% of Puerto Rico was without electricity thanks to all the downed utility poles. Galveston Hurricane. The Galveston Hurricane of 1900 took the lives of an estimated 6,000 to 12,000 people, mostly in Texas, and is reported as the deadliest hurricane in U.S. history. The storm didn't turn into a hurricane until passing west of the Florida Keys, where a sharp left turn propelled it straight toward Galveston. That gave residents and local officials less than 4 days to prepare. The Category 4 storm brought 20-foot storm surges and flash flooding to the region. More than 3,600 homes were destroyed in the hurricane, whose damage summed to $30 million. Hurricane Mitch. The slow-moving hurricane apparently halted once it reached Honduras in October 1998, dumping up to 4 inches of rain an hour for 2 days, causing mudslides and lethal flooding along the way. Approximately 11,000 people died. Mitch is the second deadliest hurricane on record and is the worst to hit the Western Hemisphere in more than 200 years. It caused more than $5 billion in damage in Honduras, where much of the country's infrastructure and crops were totally wrecked. The Great Hurricane of 1780. When the Great Hurricane of 1780 blasted its way through the Caribbean, killing roughly 22,000 people. Among the dead were British and American soldiers who had been fighting in warships dispersed throughout the region as part of the Revolutionary War. There isn't much data on record regarding the hurricane's speed or rainfall, but the storm bombarded several Caribbean islands, including Barbados, Martinique, and St. Lucia, over 6 days in October. This immense storm is deemed as the deadliest hurricane of all time.